Hey guys, so I've decided to produce some game dev tutorials. Over the last few years, a few people have found my GitHub account and emailed asking if I ever did video tutorials, and I always reply no. I always wanted to though. I just sort of felt like the Unity YouTube tutorial world was super saturated. Um, I didn't really think there was anything that I could offer that wasn't already done, and probably done better. But I recently re-downloaded this iOS game. It's a simple hyper-casual game called BallBlast, and it just sucks me in. Super addictive. It's like a perfect case study, in my opinion, for what a hyper-casual mobile game should be. It's so simple that you could probably explain the whole thing in just a few sentences. In fact, you could probably write a product specification covering every main feature on a single page. But if you were to hand that page to a developer and say build this, uh, usually it probably won't come out to be anywhere near as immersive as what No Monkeys have produced. That's because of all the little tiny details and nuance. Everything in this game is super carefully thought out to make it a world-class hyper-casual game. I decided to study all of those little details so that I can sort of get that magic in my bones. So when I'm designing my own games, I can sort of think back to that ball blast mentality, really thinking about those tiny details and what makes a game sticky. So that's what led me to doing this. If there's anything missing from the vast myriad of Unity tutorials out in the world, it's that they're typically just too high level. They dive into primary game mechanics, showing you how to do like broad strokes. They cover single topics like character movement or something like that, but I've never really seen a good deep dive into the nuances. I'd like to make a series where every detail of creating a full game is gone over. And I also want to hold myself accountable to doing this ball blast case study right for myself. And one way to make sure that I stick with it is to get other people involved. And I sort of wouldn't want to let anybody down if they're following along with me. So I'll be doing a deep dive into creating a closest possible clone of BallBlast on iOS using Unity. We'll look at user experience, the flow, timing, art, like I said, all of the nuances that make this game totally immersive. Maybe even cover stuff like implementing ads toward the end, depending on interest, I guess. I'll do my best to carefully explain everything that we're doing, so that beginners can maybe follow along. But I'm sort of assuming some C# experience or Unity familiarity. But if you ever feel like I'm spending too much or too little time on anything, just leave a comment and let me know so I can adjust accordingly. It's probably going to be a long series. We'll be making like incremental steps toward the goal. But I promise that at the end of each section, there'll be something really cool to show at the end. I'm a little bit concerned that the publishers of BallBlast will get mad at me for doing this. I'm hoping that if it does show up on their radar, they'll just accept it as flattery. I'm also hoping that it will influence anybody following along to get the game and buy the no ads version to support and appreciate the people that made it that we're sort of worshiping here. Also, the intent behind this series is 100% educational, so that might make it okay. Fingers crossed, I guess. Anyway, in this video, we're not going to dive into any game creation yet. We'll just be analyzing. We'll be looking at this YouTube video and figuring out what the game's all about, discussing any of those subtleties that make the game so addictive. The first mechanic we're going to dive into in the first video, I think, is the cannon movement. You can see that this cannon chases your finger. It's sort of it's the X position of where you're touching. The cannon rolls over to that position, but not perfectly. It's not mapped directly to where your finger is. It sort of lags behind. It sort of chases it. So I'm thinking in the first video we're going to convert that touch point to a world position, and then smooth damp the X of that world position to move the cannon. There will I'll probably also want to expose that lag control, like the smoothing in the Unity inspector, so that we can tweak it and get the feeling just right. Another thing is that those wheels rotate as it moves left and right. They sort of lock to the ground. So that's another thing that we're going to make sure we get. Just moving the cannon left and right won't be enough. One of those details that I'm talking about that make this game so cool is the fact that those wheels feel like they're making contact with the ground. So these projectiles, they shoot repeatedly while you're touching, while like touch down is true. And I think it's bullets per second, BPS, that needs to be adjustable. So as you can see from this video, as the player is upgrading things, it's increasing bullets per second, so we're seeing more projectiles, just a higher volume of projectiles coming out. Toward the end, you see that technically you're shooting more projectiles than we'll have frames to shoot on. So like if this game is running at 30 frames per second, we need to sort of do something to simulate that we're shooting something like 2,000 projectiles per second. So I'm thinking we're probably going to, for each of those bouncing targets, set a sort of state, is being shot, is not being shot state, and subtract from those bullets, from those targets, by the right amount per second. There are also these targets. I'm going to back up a little because this is a boss, which we will do, but I want to focus on the basic target concept first. So these targets, they count down as they're hit by projectiles, and they change color over time. So that 3 is blue. As it reaches 1, it gets greener. Toward the end, that range is from 500, it's red, and then it goes down through purple to blue, then to green. So it sort of has a gradient that it moves through from a value of 500 to 0. Once 0 is reached, they split. In some cases, I think there are 4 sizes, and all but the smallest size split into the next size down, 2 targets of the next size down. They also have these like particles. I'm going to try to pause on one of those explosions to point out what those particles are. Okay, so we can see that there are like bursts of smoke. There's this sort of geometric shape that grows and fades out, and then there's the sort of white lens flare, I guess, that also happens. When the smaller ones explode, it drops these coins, and then those have to be picked up by the cannon. And when they're collected, they float up to this value readout up here, and there's a little note that floats up indicating what the value is. As the balls are bouncing, there are a few cool things. The bigger balls, when they hit the ground, it causes a camera shake. I'm going to back up a little again. Wait for one. So if you saw when this ball hits the ground, it shakes the camera. So we'll implement the different camera shakes. It looks like it shakes on the y-axis when you're exploding a ball, but it shakes on the x-axis when the balls bounce. So we'll implement something along those lines. And another cool thing is the balls have a shadow as they fall. You can see the balls produce a shadow, which allows you to sort of the player to focus their attention right on that horizon line and get a lot of information right from there without having to watch where all those balls are necessarily. That's a cool detail that helps gameplay. We'll do all of these upgrades, the upgrade system, so that we can over time increase the number of projectiles and the firepower. We'll talk about that in detail when we get there. We'll also do this bounce mechanic. I'm thinking, based on the fact that it's that they never lose energy, they're just always bouncing by a very predictable same amount. I'm thinking that it's just driven in like update per frame, as opposed to using the 2D physics system. So we'll figure out how to do that. You'll notice that when they're closer to the ground, they're falling faster, and when they're higher up, they're sort of floating until they reach sort of a terminal point. We'll figure out how to do that, probably using curves and linear interpolation. What else? There's this level progress bar up here. So as the points count down, this score increases, and as the score increases to the end result goal, that progress bar fills up. So we'll be able to do that. Other things just to cover in the beginning. Right when the balls bounce, there's this little sort of burst of dust. We'll add that. And the sort of loot balls. I don't know what they're called. The question mark balls. They don't have a displayed point value. They just sort of grow and destruct as they're shot. That one right there. I'll try to find it again. So that you'll see it grows, and when it explodes, it drops a power up. That one was split shot. It's just increasing the angle at which those projectiles are shot, which allows you to sort of reach a broader range of targets. There's another one called freeze. That's pretty cool. It pauses, it stops the balls from bouncing. It doesn't look like it actually stops them. They sort of drift, so it'll be like a very slow scale of like world to time. So we'll figure out how to do that too. And I guess that's a good overview. Another power-up is Ghost, which makes you sort of invincible. It makes the cannon semi-transparent and impervious to ball collisions. There are a few more that we'll go over as we reach that stage in the development process. There are bosses, which are like stylized large targets, and they have unique movement behaviors, and they sort of emit like smaller targets as sort of challenges as they bounce around. And like I said, we might look at ads. If we do, we'll implement like a watch an ad to skip a level, or watch ads for extra lives, watch ads for extra coins, etc. But that's the basic idea. It's again a really cool game that's really carefully thought out, and we'll get into all of those details and make it feel as exact as possible. Before we dive in, I highly recommend grabbing the game and trying it out. If you do decide to follow along, do buy the no ads version, because honestly the ads are pretty annoying, and if you're comparing your results to something, you want to make that as quick as possible as you're iterating. So you probably want to buy it. And I think that's it. So I look forward to diving in. If you do start following along, communicate with me somehow by subscribing or commenting so I know what's happening. And it'll inspire me to keep trying and doing my best, and not to lower this as a priority. So thanks again. Looking forward to digging in very soon.